The X3 Pro is a controller that, quite frankly, I have put a lot of pressure on. I was hoping that it would be the G8 Plus and G8 Killer. It's a lot of things, but it's not that. A very interesting controller and one I'm glad that exists. However, I feel the need to ask GameSir, we need an X5 with everything. Please. Hi, I'm Clef and you're watching GameTech Talk. I did buy this controller with my own money, so GameSir is not associated with that review. And this is also not the first video that I've done on this controller. In fact, there's also a hands-on video that I would recommend watching first if you haven't seen it. That is sort of a complimentary video where I go over the unboxing, the buttons, the feel, the case compatibility, all these kinds of things. It answers a lot of questions, and to not repeat the content, I will focus on my experience and overall what I take away from having used this controller for 2 to 3 weeks now. In that hands-on video, I mentioned Astrobot. Yes, I did 100% the game. Also, I kept saying X2 Pro, which was a mistake on my part. I was thinking of the right controller, but I was not saying the right word. So this is the successor to the X3 from GameSir, which much like it has a cooling unit to keep your phone cool. Before we go into the controller itself, I want to bring your attention to this amazing pouch. This exterior that feels almost like a faux leather. Inside of it, you have some nice felt and some casing for your accessories that comes with it. You also have a cable that is much like the controller is, modeled after the G3 products from Apple and Macintosh of the older days. So you have what is basically a teal and white kind of embroidered braided cable, very nice looking, branded with GameSir. So you have that comes as well as, of course, the controller itself and the accessories. Overall, a very, very nice case, and I love the fact that the zipper also has that teal color to remind you of its inspiration. If you put your nail right under, you can pull it up. It's a little hard, and you can swap your A and B and your X and Y to have either the Nintendo, or also known as Japan layout, or if you prefer to have the standard, also known as the Xbox layout, you can swap your buttons. Of course, swapping the buttons will not swap their value, but you can easily do that with a shortcut or in software. It's not the only controller from GameSir to do that. The X2 Pro, the actual X2 Pro, also has that feature, and so does the Galileo G8 Plus. Now, I did test it out, and unfortunately, these buttons are not interchangeable with the other controllers that also have this feature, which I find is a little unfortunate. It could almost be an Easter egg goodie for repeated customers of the brand. I hope this is something that they will find a way to make it interchangeable between models in the future, because I feel like it would be nice to be able to go back and forth between your buttons, much like you can with the shells from the G8 and G8 Plus. Now, when it comes to the grips and overall ergonomics, when I talked about it during the hands-on, I mentioned that I felt as though I would prefer without the grips, and having played with it for a while, I have to say now I much prefer having the grips on. With my pinky and ring finger, I can kind of hold this little bump here, and overall the feel of the plastic is something I also prefer versus not having them. I don't have the X3, unfortunately, but I did try to see if those grips were interchangeable with the X2S and X2 Pro models, and while you can somewhat make it fit, it doesn't really work all that well. Definitely something that I would greatly hope that GameSir will keep with its future X line products. I love the fact that you have this grip that you can take in and out, very easy. It also, if you want to shed some weight, there's different reasons why you may want to play without or with. When doing it without, you don't have the usual rubber grip that most other X lines of product have. Here it's a plastic dotted grip, especially with not having the rubber. I like this because it does feel better than the sensation of this plastic, but beyond the feel itself, so is the case with just the overall ergonomics. It just, at least for me, it just took a little bit of getting used to, but once I did, I much preferred this setup. Now, the other part is when it comes to the swappable D-pad, and we kind of talked about it, but I didn't really test games. It feels good. It's a really good D-pad. It has that responsive nature, and it has enough travel that it allows you to do good on your input commands. Overall, I was very pleased with it. There are a few options that I would say are superior, but one thing for sure, if you are just like me, someone that do not think of the G8 and G8 Plus D-pad as a good one for fighting games, I would greatly let you know that this is much better. And I would say that out of all the different telescopic controllers that GameSir have, D-pad has never been, at least in my opinion, their absolute strength. This is the best D-pad that we've seen from a telescopic controller from GameSir. I do think there are a few options on the market that would provide you with a better fighting-centric D-pad, but as far as platformer, as far as 2D games, this is awesome, and for fighting games, it's definitely more than good enough. And when talking about the stick resolution, we don't have anything special, but they do feel good. The performance is also very nice. You also have the replacement ones if you like a taller stick overall. You do have some controllers that are full formed like the G8 and G8 Plus that will have overall what I consider to be superior sticks. But you do have something that is Hall effect here, so no risks of drift, better precision overall. And I always find the curve with Hall effect sticks to be somewhat a little too aggressive at times. If you are someone that would rather go for the solution that will give you a better result right out of the box, I don't know that this is the stick for that. I think the G8 and G8 Plus are better options, but I do find that you will have overall good results over time. I already have observed that I've been getting better and better with them. So to me, that says everything that I need to know. To me, this is very obvious who this controller caters for. One that I reviewed a couple months back is the X4 Aileron, and to me this is a controller that addresses that same market, people that mostly play competitive games on mobile. And the reason being that, well, beyond the fact that you have a cooling solution, of course, and we'll talk about that in the video, the other thing is every buttons in here are mechanical, including the triggers. Now, some people may not like that as much, and I can indeed agree that I was a little surprised when I got this out of the box because I was not expecting that. But as far as how the buttons feel, they do feel very, very good overall. It's a very good tactile feedback, something that feels more like a micro switch with low travel than a dome switch, and that goes for all the buttons. That goes for the D-pad, that goes for the face buttons, the shoulders, and triggers. They're just overall highly responsive solutions for gaming. So if you are into MOBAs, if you are into shooting games, something that will require high precision and very fast reaction time, there's not a single button on this controller that does not seem to be designed with that in mind. And with that said, and to kind of tie it back in with the intro, I think GameSir, while not giving us everything on this controller, for example, you don't have back paddles, I still think that they knew exactly who that controller was for. And this is something that I have constantly praised GameSir, because you can tell that the people engineering these devices understand the different types of gamers that they find on the market. And to me, this controller screams that they understand who that they're going for with it. And I do think it's a controller that is highly tailored for competitive people, but I also have found myself having an extremely pleasant experience when talking about emulation. In terms of the feedback of your buttons, it did perform brilliantly, and something that I would also recommend this controller for. So let's go into software as I break down the different things that you can do, because there are new things unique to any other controllers from GameSir when it comes to the telescopic market. So let's go over the software and see what these are. We're gonna fly through that software. So first off, you have the gamepad testing to check your buttons are working. Then you have the buttons settings to change your layout from the Switch type to Xbox type. Then you have the joystick settings where you can address your dead zones, your dead band, swap your left joystick with the D-pad, etc. Next is the somatosensory settings, and this is where you go to tweak your gyro. Amazing tool, and I really hope we can find that in more controllers from competitors, and for GameSir to even improve on what they already have, but it is awesome. You can change a bunch of settings in there that will just ultimately let you tailor the experience to have it exactly to what you want. Then you have the vibration intensity where you can change the vibration and also test it. You have your radiator where you can address the fan, and also if you are plugged with enough amperage and voltage, you can have a stronger mode activated, which is called the quick chilling. If you don't have enough power, it's not going to let you activate that mode. And then also you can stop the charging to your phone to prevent the heating that it causes if you really have to tune the temperature reduction coming from the cooler. Last but not least, you have a couple more settings like restore to default, connection tutorial where it shows you how to connect, your product manual, you can drop feedback, and your firmware upgrade. And then of course, if you back out, you can select your games to use the mapping software. Right, let's continue with the video. Now the other part is you can pretty much use this everywhere. You can use that on your iPhones with USB-C, you can use that on your Android, you can even use that on your PC, but much like other telescopic controllers, you will not be able to plug in through that USB-C. You'll need a USB-C female to male and to go from this one. And by the way, if I haven't mentioned it, there is a 3.5mm jack. So if you want to reroute your audio without having to rely on Bluetooth, you can do that. Compatibility, it pretty much works everywhere. If you've seen my recent video that I've done about the G8 Plus Unleashed, you'll know that I talked about why some controllers are able to be tweaked on iOS and some others are not. And if you've studied that controller before it was released, you might have picked up at some point, as I had, the information that it had Bluetooth. And when I tested it and when looking at the box, I noticed that there isn't when it comes to connection to your devices. However, there is when it comes to being able to communicate with your software. And this is what I talked about on the G8 Unleashed video. This is a trick that some manufacturers are picking up on to allow you to modify your controller even on iOS without having the MFI certification, which is, in my opinion, brilliant and gives more power to the users like us. And this is no exception. So when I say compatibility, yes, you are able to play on iPhones, you are able to play on Android, but you're also able to customize your controller on both of these platforms. Also, you have a few shortcuts to make those modifications. You have 3 modes effectively on this controller. You have the Android and iOS mode, which spoofs this controller as a DualSense one. And then you have another mode, which seems to be basically an HID Android mode. And the third mode is only accessed through the software, which happens to be the G-Touch mode, to be able to use your software to map on the screen. So why do I talk about this? Well, when it comes to rumble, this controller does have rumble, but I do find that it's not gonna work consistently. There are places where it will work, there are places where it will not work. For me and my testings, it hasn't worked on Moonlight, Rally, Origins, and I think, I'm not sure, but I think it is because it is spoofed as a DualSense controller. As we know, DualSense has phenomenal haptic feedback. They basically piggyback off of the same technology that you find in Joy-Cons and the Switch Pro controllers, an HD type of rumble. They call it different on Sony's side, but it's basically the same technology. And I think that has to do as to why rumble does not necessarily work everywhere that you would expect it to. And also, when it comes to the rumble of the controller, I am unsure at this point in time if it's a small overdriven rotary motor. I don't think it is, because it feels and sounds like a haptic motor. It's not necessarily the best rumble experience. I think it's just there to be able to say that it is to some extent. Now, when it comes to gyro, that works very nicely. You can go on Moonlight, connect to your computer. Gyro will work on Steam. It will also work if you're using it wired. And also you have the software portion that we talked about, where you can also use that gyro not necessarily to work in places where it is natively supported, but also to reroute that gyro data to your sticks, which is such a great addition from GameSir, and something I would hope that they add to the G8 Plus, because a lot of people want that feature on their controllers. And Absolute S9, as it stands right now, and to my knowledge, is the only one on the market to offer this on their telescopic controllers, and comes in GameSir as the second one with the X3 Pro. Now, logically speaking, gyro is gyro. It is just up to them to have the software to reroute that value to your sticks. But contrary to Absolute, this implementation is a lot more sound here, because they give you the ability to translate that layer to your yaw, to your roll, address the curves, address the dead zones. So while Absolute S9 does have that feature, it is far more complete on the X3 Pro, to the point that I would say that if gyro aiming is something that you were absolutely adamant on doing, this should be the only controller that you do consider. But there is a huge caveat, which is there is no Bluetooth. It means that because this one can only work wired, you will not be able to play Call of Duty Mobile with this controller. I did try, and unfortunately I was unsuccessful. And also, there are other games like on Star Rail that, for some reason, I don't know why that is, but on Android it only works with an Xbox recognized controller. And because you only have a PlayStation mode, it also does not work on Star Rail. To my knowledge, these are the only 2 games that you're not going to be able to play with these controller but it's important to know. And with that in mind, even though it has what is, at least at this point in time, the best gyro implementation, it's a little unfortunate that one of the bigger games that you would want to use that on, unfortunately, does not support that controller. Something to definitely keep in mind. All right, so let's talk about the main reason, and that one I wanted to capture live. You may have not seen it because it was off screen, off camera, but I've been having this little Easter egg, which by the way will be featured in the tier list. So this has been running nonstop, and right now the controller is, oh my god, it's so hot, so hot. So I'm running everything that I can on this. I have charging happening, I have brightness at the maximum. There is no case on the phone this time around. We're getting into the 80s, 90s temperature. It is extremely hot, like to the point that I don't want to touch this. This is extremely hot. And let me get my camera, my thermal camera. Of course, what we have here is the temperature of the sensor, and see, it says here the temperature of the phone is too high and charging has stopped. Okay, so it actually stopped charging because the temperature is too high. The fans are not running, and I'm running this chip in Diablo mode, which is basically the hottest it can, like it's pushing it all the way. Right now, as it is, the hottest part of the phone, the front portion of the phone, we're looking at approximately 50, 51, 52 Celsius degrees. And the chip itself from the phone is saying approximately 88, 90 even sometimes. So it's really hot. So there's a little space here kind of to let the hot air out. And we're looking at 55 Celsius degrees. Like, it is warm to the touch. It is to the point that I would not be able to hold this phone. So what I'm gonna do now is I'll take it out and we'll look at the back of it to see what it looks like. I don't wanna close it. Oh boy, it's hot. It's so hot. Oof. It's really like it's hot. Jesus. Okay. Oh my god, it's hot. This is 60 Celsius degrees. I could probably cook an egg on this phone, not kidding. And one of the unfortunate part is the fan will only work when having an external source of power outside. Right now the temperature is cranking up, and just the fact that the phone is so hot, it is warming the cooler, but the cooler is not working. So we just see the temperature going up. Right now it's going 35. What I'm gonna do is I'm now gonna plug in the cooler and see how low we can get that temperature. And already the temperature is going down. And the cooler, the way that it works, it's like, you know, those creams that you put on your body, feels cool for a second, and then it's like everything's normal, but the moment you blow some wind on it, it gets like super cool. It's kind of the same thing with this cooler. So it's not really gonna do anything until you power up the fans. But the moment you power up the fans, because there is an airflow, it will drop the temperature drastically. And by doing so, it will prevent your phone from throttling. And as we can see here, I'm down in the 74, 73, but I'm gonna keep it running. We are down to approximately 47 Celsius degrees in terms of the top of the phone. Indeed, it's already got much cooler. Don't get me wrong, it's still hot at this point in time, but it's a lot more bearable. And we're down to 49, 48 on the side vents. And that's where this cooler is so efficient. I'm also not getting the message anymore that it's too hot to be able to charge my phone, and it seems to have settled at this temperature. Right now I am at 30 Celsius degrees on the iPhone. We are at about the same temperatures when looking at the actual thermal camera. Is that gonna make the phone cold? No, I wouldn't go as far as saying that, but it's definitely giving me what I need to be able to push my gaming session way longer. I do expect that this type of cooler will do a fine job at not only cooling your phone, but also pulling the heat, as long as you are providing an external source for this to work. Now, the last thing I want to check is the cooler. What's the temperature of the back of the cooler? Of course, we do see it here, but that is a sensor. I want to see the actual surface and also the back of the phone. And it's a lot cooler versus what it was. Yep. And the cooler itself, yeah, it's extremely cold in comparison to the rest of the controller that is moving and working. And look at all that heat that it's pulling. Definitely working. Now, the last thing that I do want to point out which is also amazing, is depending on the phone and the way that they are internally built, is you may not necessarily have the full benefit by having the cooling system being right down the middle. And this is another feature that is not one per se, but I still consider it to be with the way that this controller is designed, is you're able to move the center portion by a little to really be in the area where it's going to be the most effective. So for me, for example, all the heat seems to be happening here, and that's where I have the vent. So it does make sense that the heat would be here. So I could push it up to even potentially improve the results that I get out of the cooler. So I'm going to let this thing relax a little bit. And as we talk about performance now, in terms of cooling rate, we are looking at 250 Hertz. There's only one mode effectively on this controller that can be used as a wired controller, which is the DualSense mode. Now, when looking at price, this is not a cheap controller. You know, I feel like you have to want to have something like this. And again, it's one of those controllers, much like the X4 Aileron, that I think it is laser focused towards a certain buyer, a certain potential customer. And if you are that person, then you know why this is the controller that you want to have for your gaming. Now, one other question that I wanted to answer is, can it be modded? Well, there's a few things I want to address. First, you may not see it here, but that part is slightly deeper, which will greatly help the compatibility with camera bumps. And I think it's not a mod per se, but I think it's a nice touch to make sure that you're not going to run into issues when using that controller. Now, when it comes to modding the controller itself, I have not attempted it, and hopefully GameSir is not going to make me look like a fool again. I don't necessarily feel like I should say that it's not going to be feasible, but I don't think it's going to be worth it, if that makes sense. In fact, I'm pretty sure you can mod it. I just don't think it's going to be worth it. And here's the reason why. Here you have a cable for the power to the fan, right? So this will greatly limit the extent that you would reach by modding it. But if you look at this portion, you do have the coils. It's the exact same system as all other GameSir controllers. And basically, you could undo this part and stretch it even further. However, the coils here are a lot, and I mean a lot smaller. They're smaller than what you find on the X2S lines of product, definitely smaller than what you find on the GameSir Galileo G8 and G8 Plus. My assumption here is that if you do mod it, the stretch that you will get will not be like what you find on the X2S or what you find on the G8 lines of product, which means that chances that you could put this on a tablet is probably going to be very slim. If anything, you might be able to mod it to go on a Lenovo Legion Y700 kind of thing, or maybe an iPad mini. It's not worth buying if you were hoping to use that on a tablet. And then you would also have the issue of potentially not having the cooler positioned at all where it needs to be when it comes to a tablet or a tablet PC. Can it be modded? I am certain of it. Should you mod it? I think it's completely pointless to do on this controller. That is my personal opinion, of course. So the last question for me to answer on this review, would I recommend? 100% yes. And I keep referring back to that controller. Much like the X4 Aileron, I think this controller goes for a very specific target of consumers, at least in my opinion. I would argue that this controller does an actual better job than the X4 Aileron at really having a solution that is perfectly tailored for people that enjoy the shooting type of games. Now, of course, the one exception is Call of Duty Mobile, and there is a possibility that in the future, you'll find more of those games where you're not able to play, but you can still rely on the mapping solution. All in all, great controller, great product, if not the perfect product. That's why I'm hoping that one of those days in the future, we have a modulable controller from GameSir that lets us put all these great things that they have going, having extra paddles, having a cooler, having gyro, having tablet mod compatibility. I would love to see a controller that can do all that. And while this is not this controller, this is a great product, and you do retain some of the key things that a lot of people are looking for, like the 3.5mm jack, and you have some of the nicer things that people are looking for, like gyro support to your sticks, and with all the adjustments that you could ever dream of. You have software compatibility, you have great mechanical feel buttons. I do wish there was analog, I do wish there was back paddles, but I'll give it to them. What is there is great, and that's where it ends. Thank you very much for watching. As always, consider hitting the like, consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.